Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
Well, hello and welcome to the MuseCast. It is so good to see you all here today as we continue the conversation from Sunday's sermon. I'm Shawna Boren. That fine gentleman is Dan Kent. And you guys, we've got Meghan Good here. And I'm doing this because on my screen, that's where she is. So she may be somewhere else for you, but Meghan Good. And that means thumbs up. We are so excited. Welcome, Meghan. Good to have you with us today. We are going to get right into our sermon summary because we want to really get into the richness of talking about what Meghan had to share with us. We are in week 2 of our Getting Real series, talking about the spiritual practices. And so we are thrilled that we have Meghan here so that she can go a little deeper with what she shared with us on Sunday. All right, Dan, sermon summary us up.
All right. That's a tough phrase that you just said. That was impressive. Sermon summarize us up. I don't know if I did it right. All right. So here is, first of all, an awesome sermon. The sermon really fit well into our series that we have going right now. We're doing the series on the spiritual disciplines that Jesus teaches in the Sermon on the Mount. And this one nestled in there just so perfectly. It's almost as if you've been on our staff, Meghan, for the last 2 months as we've discussed what we're going to do with this series. So I was very impressed at how either your cunning intuition or the Holy Spirit's guidance kind of fit your sermon in there. Is very, very nice. So your sermon, let me make sure I got the right page. See, I'm already on the wrong page. Here it is. Your sermon really was about following Jesus and his, as he does the spiritual disciplines. And you really talk about a lot of kind of profound elements of this that I think it's impressive because I think there are important teachings that a lot of times you don't hear at church, but I think they're very, very central. Number one, you kick us off starting about what's called kenotic Christology, which is this idea, kenosis, this idea that God emptied himself when he became Jesus so that Jesus would be fully human. And it's something that I've talked a lot about. It's something that Paul Eddy has talked a lot about. We need to get Greg to talk more about it because I think it's just that important. So you talk about that, look, when we're watching Jesus do the disciplines, we're watching another fellow human being do the disciplines, human in every way. And so you talk about how, how profound that is, first of all, which I think is right. And then you talk about the kind of implication that we should be asking, which is, well, if he's just another person like us, how is it that he's able to heal the blind and raise the dead and all that kind of stuff? Is he human or not? Because that seems very supernatural. And so what you argue is that the reason why Jesus is able to do that is not because he's God. It's because he has, as a human, when he's fully human, he has this connection with God that really starts off with the baptism and persists throughout his ministry. And what he promises is that we have the same opportunity to have this kind of connection with God. And so we have the opportunity to do many of the things that Jesus did. However, the problem is that our connection with God can get kinked, and so that the flow isn't there. And so we need to open up the flow in order to get that going again. And the spiritual disciplines are one of the ways that really kind of progressively, kind of consistently keep that flow between us and God open so that God can work through us. And then, there's a lot more that you said. There's a lot of small things in there, and I would end up taking all of our time if I hit them all. But to me, that's like the thrust of the teaching, is that Jesus is fully human and he does these disciplines as a model for how we can do the disciplines. And the disciplines, in the same way that they opened up this channel between Jesus and God, they can do likewise for us.
Amen.
Did I miss anything? I know I missed a lot. I missed a lot, but did I miss anything as central to the sermon?
I think that caught the arc of it.
Yeah,
Good.
good job, Dan. He is the best summary giver. So,
I didn't even know that was a
I'm just
category, so that's good.
I mean, it is, and you win it. I'm just going to say one line from Megan, your sermon, that to me was, and we usually say this for the end, but that was to me the bow on top. That was the golden nugget. And that is when you said that the spiritual practices are not the homework, but they are the critical infrastructure. I just thought that was like a boom, drop the mic moment, and I loved it. However, we want to hear from you because you're the one who gave the sermon. And we know that sometimes because of time or just the flow of the way things are going, you don't get to like dive into certain points like you normally would like to if you had more time, or there's something that you left out that you wish you had included. So Megan, this is your opportunity to kind of not like a take two, but just and also this is what I would like to say on top of what I already said. So we just want to give you the floor for a few minutes to do that.
Yeah. Well, when I was working on this sermon in the early stages, the whole sermon was actually centered around the story of Jesus that I didn't even get to in this version I gave for Woodland, which was the story of Jesus's transfiguration. It's this moment in the ministry of Jesus where he's up on a mountain and he's basically on a prayer retreat. He's there to pray, and he's with three of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, that he tends to take with him. And in the midst of this prayer time, Jesus has this profound experience of encountering Elijah and Moses, these leaders who came before him. And it's kind of like when all the former presidents get together and advise the current president on, so they're talking with Jesus about his death. But I think when I've always heard that story discussed or preached in the past, people really focus on the experience that Jesus is having. Like, what does that moment mean to him? But what really struck me as I was reading recently was what is happening to the three disciples he takes with him. I love how I think Luke in particular words it, where basically Jesus has been having this like intense prayer time away on this retreat, and the disciples are with him for a while. They're praying for a while, and then they all start falling asleep. They get drowsy. They slept against the rocks. They're all just kind of draped out there in the sun, dozing. And Luke literally says like they almost missed it. Like they got drowsy and they almost didn't see this like most profound moment of Jesus's ministry. And Luke says, except they managed to stay awake and they saw his glory. And it was that line, like, except they managed to stay awake and they saw it, that just really got to me. And I thought, how, the disciples don't have narcolepsy, yet this issue of sleeping comes up over and over again in their story. And it's clearly a metaphor. Jesus talks to them multiple times about sleeping. And basically the idea is it's really hard to stay awake to our own lives. It's really hard to stay awake to the presence and movement of God within existence. And like heaven can literally crack open right next to you and you can miss the whole affair just because you're dozing and you're distracted. And when Jesus talks to his disciples about spiritual practices, this is part of what he's saying to them is like, stay awake so you don't miss it, right? Like everything in your life is in a certain way sleep inducing. And I'm trying to call you to wakefulness so that when heaven opens, you see it happen. And that really speaks to me. And I feel challenged by that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Well,
I love it.
That reminds me of something else that you said in your sermon. You said that you made the distinction between branches and vines and cell phones and chargers, and this idea that discipleship is branches and vines. You are a branch connected to the vine, and that's a branch can't just get up and go walk around and live alone for a while and then maybe in a couple of years come back and connect to no, it's going to die out there. You need to be connected. And I think that the what you draw from that is that a lot of us live as phones thinking that church is just like the spiritual charge that we can get. And then that's fine. That's all we need is our weekend charge. And I think part of going to sleep is not being connected to the vine. And I think that, if you're in a season where you can't really be part of a Christian community, and that's the situation you're in, but that's something that you should strive for. I think you should strive for that kind of regular connection, doing regular disciplines, make it part of your routine. And I just thought that was really, really profound. Yeah.
Well, I think when you put it that way, it makes it clear that the goal of the disciplines isn't, it's kind of like drinking your coffee in the morning. Like the goal isn't just to feel awake while you're sipping, right? The goal is to like be able to go into your day in a state of wakefulness. And part of what we're aiming for when we do these practices consistently is we don't go back to sleep. We don't pull the plug out of the wall. Like we take time every day to like tend to that connection so that it stays secure and open as we go out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. I loved, Meghan, how you several times throughout your sermon talked about and encouraged us to see how Jesus beautifully aligned himself with the heart of God so that he could do the work of God, so that he could know the heart of God. And when I hear that, I just picture, to me, this beautiful relationship between Father and Son, empowered by the Holy Spirit. And so I know there are folks tuning in who would say, well, that worked super well for Jesus, possibly for some of the disciples because they were right there in that vicinity. But how can I, in 2021, align myself with the heart of God so that I could begin to have the mind of God and work for God through the power of the Holy Spirit? How can I do that in my everyday life? Do you have any guidance for people who are just kind of feeling like this is just too high a mountain for us to climb? We need it here on ground level here. And is it even possible?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we can at least initially relieve ourselves of one thing, which is like Jesus might have been exceptionally good at this, but I don't see any evidence the disciples were exceptionally good at it.
Right.
Like their honest accounts of it is like, we slept at the most crucial moments of Jesus's life. Like we struggled with this. And so I think we can take from their story that, if we struggle, we're in good company. And that despite that struggle, they were able to experience extraordinary things and witness to extraordinary things in the course of their life. And you don't have to be perfect to, the flow is so big and it's so good that, even an imperfect vessel of it, it's still an incredible thing to be a part of. So that would be one piece.
I think we elevate the disciples so much, right? But like you said, just read their own accounts and you will see just how over and again they kind of, I don't want to say miss the mark, but like you said, they fall asleep. They get it wrong quite a bit. So I don't think we have to like think, oh my gosh, they did do amazing things, but they were absolutely human. So I think we're in good company there. I agree. Continue, Meghan. I think I cut you off.
Well, I was just going to say we could talk more specifically about practices that might help that. I know that's kind of where you're going with your series, so I don't want to press in too far on that, but I don't know if you want to open that can yet or not.
Open it up. Can's open.
Go for it. Yeah.
Let the butterflies
I mean, one
out.
of the things I think is worth highlighting, I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding even around the role of Scripture. We noted in the sermon, I just briefly touched on the fact we have silence in Jesus's life for 30 years, except for this one story of him being in the temple studying the Bible. And I talk to people all the time that like get particularly frustrated in their relationship with the Bible because they're like, I'm reading it and it's hard. And like, I don't know exactly what I'm taking away. It's not obvious to me most days, like what my application landing point is. And people stop feeling like there's a point and they give up. The same thing with prayer. Like, I'm not sure what this prayer time produced. Like, I'm not sure what it was effective for. So I'm going to stop doing it. And I think we really miss that these practices are formative for us, even if we can't trace the landing point most of the time. But every time we come to the story of God, like Jesus spent decades of his life studying this story, because in part you're entering into a narrative flow and just deeply absorbing a story about the world and God's engagement in it that begins to form your worldview and your imagination so that over time you see the possibilities differently. And like, I can't most days tell you how that's happening. Like, I can't most days walk out of any kind of spiritual practice and be like, this is what changed today. Once in a while I can, but most of the time I can't. But that doesn't mean that work isn't happening. Most of the work that comes out of spiritual practice is done by the Spirit invisibly under the surface. And so our work is just showing up for it, right? Like our work isn't producing something. It's just being present and being open and allowing the Spirit to do that formational work.
Yeah,
Show up.
Yeah, it's almost like you have like in the Spirit of the Disciplines, Dallas Willard talks a lot about how spiritual discipleship isn't just about the walking on water and healing the sick, and it's just a many dull hours and many dull kind of time periods. It's just this routine. It's just this regular thing, and you look at like you grow a flower, and we have wildflowers, which I love our wildflowers, but for 3/4 of the summer they just look like big weeds. Then finally they bloom these flowers, and then they're gone like really quick, and then it looks like weeds again. And I think that sometimes spiritual discipleship, there's just a lot of time when the flowers come in. I have no idea how. I don't know how a bright crimson red flower comes out of this drab green stalk of basically fiber, but it does. And the branch, the stem just keeps doing what it's doing, and then all of a sudden a flower emerges from it. And that's how I think of discipleship, is that there's a lot of you're kind of opening up that hose, and it's kind of it's not as simple as a kinked hose and that you just go and move it. It's a very internal thing, so I think it takes a lot of time. So
yeah.
What would you guys say to those who aren't quite sure? So, because unfortunately in our culture, so many people are results oriented, right? They need to be able to measure success, failure, movement, fallback, unfortunately. What would you say to those that just say, I'm not hearing a reason to put in the time for these things if there's not going to be an end result? How will I know that I'm being effective at my homework, which we're saying is not homework, but because it's so internal, so under the surface, because it is critical infrastructure work, they're not seeing those results. What would you guys say to encourage folks that this is so much more than that, what we're talking about here?
Yeah. I'll tell you one of the things that motivates me, as I understand the larger kind of Christian story about where we think the future is headed, most of us spend our lives sort of building and amassing all sorts of things. Like we do it with possession and job success and achievements and accolades and like whatever we kind of find our sense of identity and our meaning in. But as Christians understand our story, I think like everything we build and achieve kind of falls away at the door of the kingdom of heaven, right? Like none of your accolades, none of your titles, none of your possessions, none of the things you built are going with you. The thing that you're taking with you into the rest of forever is you. And which means like the most important and the most enduring work of your life is like who you are becoming and that self that you are able to bring into this new kingdom that God is forming. And I think that gives a kind of weight to like this aspect of the formation of character and open channel with God. Like when I invest in that, I am doing the legacy work of my life. Like I'm building the thing that stays. And if we can like keep reminding ourselves of that part of the story, like there's stuff I'm doing that is meaningful in the moment, but isn't going to last. And then there's stuff I'm going to do that might not feel meaningful in this moment, but will have permanent results.
That's
it shifts the kind of balance of the focus.
Yeah. That's a really good answer. I was trying to think of like, okay, so I feel like the question sets me up to do a sales pitch for doing discipleship. And I think Megan's that's a really good sales pitch. I think another good sales pitch though, and this would be a great 1-2 punch, like Megan's and this one. Jesus, and I think you quote from this in your sermon, but Jesus says, "My teaching is not my own. It comes from the one who sent me." And then this is the key right here. Anyone who chooses to do the will of God will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. Here's this, like, Jesus throws this gauntlet down and says, do you want to know if I am just some bozo walking around in first century Palestine? Or do you want to know that I am actually who I say I am, God incarnate? Here's how you find out. It's not through logic. It's not through a microscope. It's through keeping my teachings. It's through doing my discipline. So I that's why I always say, like, if you doubt that Jesus is God, he tells you how to find out. He gives us this test: do the disciplines, live this way. And I think the promise is that it will eventually transform you to the extent that you'll realize that there was something very special about this teaching. So yeah, that's my sales pitch.
I like that 1-2 punch, guys. All right. So as we are rounding to the end of our time together, I want to give you both an opportunity to leave something with our community, with our viewers, that you just want to make sure they hear you. If they hear nothing else, this is the thing that you want them to take away and dream about at night as they reflect upon Meghan's sermon and this episode of the MuseCast. And should we let our guest go first, Dan, or do you want to give her a moment?
Well, Meghan, how are you feeling?
First.
Well, I have my answer, I think.
Good. Go for it.
That's what Dan was hoping for. He was hoping you'd have your answer so he would have time.
I'm usually the person hoping that. I mean, and I only have mine because I think I just said it. What is the heart of it for me? That like your becoming is the most enduring, the most important part of what you can invest your life in. That, you know, God is a God of relationship, of process, of this journey of becoming. And I think everything in our life is kind of tailored and designed to make us think in the short term. Like what feels gratifying. And I know how strong that pull is, you know, like I often sit down in the evening and I'm like, I really want to watch Netflix, and like everything in me just wants to hit play. Like that's right now, that's all I want. And just weighing that like momentary desire against this big picture of like, what do I want my story to be? Like, what do I want to take into this forever that Jesus is drawing me into? Like, who do I want to become in the midst of that journey? Keeping that big picture helps me make the small choices every day to say, I can give just a little bit to this. Like before I hit play, I'm going to stop for 15 minutes and I'm going to like invest something in forever. Right. It's in some ways it's kind of like budgeting. You know, when people budget for the first time, it feels shocking if you're used to just like spending thoughtlessly. Right. But part of it is just beginning to be like, can I put a couple dollars a day into the future? Right. Can I begin to shift the rhythms of my life for the sake of a bigger story? And that's part of what we're looking at.
Yeah. That's really good.
Top that, Dan.
Yeah, I don't think I could top that, but I will say, just going back to your garden hose analogy and just discipleship as a way of continually through a process of you know, regularly doing these disciplines, keeping that channel open. I think part of that is seeking God, and you know, like part of what motivates people to continue those disciplines, especially when they just feel like a weed without any flower. I think part of it is just to find that hunger to seek God. And, you know, I just did a search that, you know, over 100 times people are called or rewarded or praised for seeking God in the Old Testament. And that implies that it's not easy. Otherwise, we won't be told over and over again to keep doing it. And I think that one of the ways that we seek God, especially given what Jesus says in John 7, is by obeying these teachings and to doing it, even when you don't understand it, even when it doesn't seem like it's doing anything, to keep at it. And if you fail to keep at it, to get back up and try again. And I think that's what, you know, the Old Testament doesn't say find God, it says to seek God, meaning that it is this progressive sort of ongoing thing. And so too is discipleship. So if you go through a time period when, you know, I haven't been praying, I haven't been, you know, giving any of my money, I haven't been, you know, maybe you've never fasted. I mean, I don't know. But just have grace on yourself and to give it a shot and keep at it and pick yourself up and try again.
Good job. Thank you so much, Meghan, for joining us and for helping us to see a bigger picture of what this is truly all about. Ultimately, this is about relationship with a beautiful God who loves us and who wants to meet with us, right? And he wants to envelop us and empower us and flow through us for the sake of others. But I think we lose sight of that so many times. And I love what you said here at the end about investment. Like, can we take a little bit of our space to invest in something eternal versus the immediate instant gratification? And that's what it's all about. This loving relationship in which we create space to get to know the one in which we love and the one in which we serve, and allow him to reveal himself to us, and just to continually seek him, because he is there and he is with us and he desires to be amongst us in such beautiful, powerful ways. So good. All right, folks, that's all the time we have today. We just want to thank you for tuning in. We want to thank Meghan for joining us, and thank you for what she shared with us on Sunday. And we invite you to continue to come back. Don't miss the rest of the series. You're going to hear from Dan in a couple of weeks. And remember to circle back to the MuseCast, where we continue the conversation from Sunday's sermon. Have a great rest of the week, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everyone.